Hello everyone. I have decided to kind of dust off an older game that I have, maybe a whole set of games, and do a video just kind of going through how the game plays. Not really here to teach anybody how it plays, just more or less kind of like what I do with my other videos, show what has happened, who's gone where, who's ahead of what, that kind of thing. So this game is called First to Fight. I think the original might have been called, the original game perhaps was called Case White or something. And these games are from the 1990s. And this is, here's the map of what the game looks like when it's set up for the Polish side anyway. And these games, I thought, I collected all of them, well, as many as I could. They do an incredible job, in my opinion, of giving you a pretty good feel for what the units on a divisional or brigade level were capable of in World War II. And they give you a lot of detail and a lot of, I guess, different units. Now, this game was basically built off of the concept of these little cardboard cutout pieces, and I'll get closer to a couple so you can see them. And the advantage of doing these little square pieces like this is that you can put a lot of information on them, and you can get a lot of them uniquely detailed in comparison to like Axis and Allies, which I love as well. But in that, you've got the plastic pieces, and there's really no way of differentiating the strengths of different units. But when you do this kind of a game, you can build out, it's not focusing. You can build out, you can put down whatever you want on a piece of paper. So for those of you who are familiar with military insignia and or symbols, I guess I should say, these are all based off of military, NATO, I guess, or acceptable military insignia. For example, this represents artillery, if you're not aware of it, a cross. The two X's above that represent a division. So that's a division of infantry. 3 lines is a battalion, or no, a regiment, pardon me. 3 lines is a regiment. 1 X, like this, is a battalion. And then 2 lines on the very top of here would be, that would be a battalion. So that's a battalion. That would be a regiment, the artillery that I'm pointing at that my camera hasn't gotten to. That would be a battalion, and then that would be a division right there. And those are just basically the various sizes of units. That means that basically there's usually larger numbers of troops involved in them, usually, and usually they've got more logistical support and things like that when you get to the bigger sized units, which are like divisions. As far as the symbols on the very front, the pictures, the X is infantry. This is a symbol for mountain. It's got the same X, but it's got like a dark triangle in the center. Artillery has a dot. Let's see, what else? If I go over here, this is a tank, so that's armor. If it's got that symbol, it's kind of an oval shaped. These are considered border, so it looks kind of like the Czechoslovakian flag without any colors. Come on. It will not focus, but you get the idea. It's like a triangle on one side cut, and then the box is cut in half. That is pretty obvious to most people. It's construction because it's got that symbol. Now that may or may not be NATO. I don't know. But this is engineers. It's like an E that's laying on its side. And then that's heavy anti-aircraft with the dark triangle in that box. And the two little blips on the bottom are representative wheels, so that means that's a motorized artillery. And let's see, that would be heavy anti-aircraft. Or pardon me, that would be motorized anti-aircraft. I apologize for my... The line on the side, this one right here that has a dark line on the side, that is a machine, that represents machine gun. That's a specific unit that just, their speciality is machine guns. And then the box with nothing in it is like militia, paramilitary, National Guard. It's basically like more of your conscript soldiers. So you get the idea. And all of them have values on them. The first number represents the strength. If there is a second number, it represents the defense. So the first number is the attack, second number is defense, if there is one. Otherwise, if there's only one, then it's attack and defense. And then the third number is the movement rating of that unit. And of course it has, for historical purposes, they know what divisions or regiments or whatever were in different places at the start of the war. And that's basically kind of how that works. This game has one of the best, in my opinion, the best, I guess, mechanics for representing the Blitzkrieg that the Germans basically used on Poland, used on France, used on Russia, and it basically, the rules allow units to hit, to attack, and then there's a second movement phase afterwards. So essentially, for example, the German armor could come and hit this line, let's say. If they break through, then they can move again, and they can basically get further and further into your territory. There's also a thing called zone of control. It's called a ZOC for short. But the zone of control basically enables, it slows down the movement of the opponent. So even though they might break through in certain areas, well, if the units are large enough, then they have like a control zone 1 hex away, and it costs additional movement points to go through that. And so because of that, the Germans, for example, who units are representative of motorized units and armored units, along with the aircraft that I'll talk about in a moment, they're able to break through the lines easier and get further behind the lines and cut supply off. The other thing this game does is it does represent supply. So if you cut off units from supply from wherever they're getting their supply from, pardon me, then that's also good for your forces because it makes the opponent weaker. So each side's trying to like cut the supply off of the other. And the Germans, obviously, at the beginning of the game, or the beginning of the war, in this Poland scenario, and the other scenarios up until 1943 or so, maybe even, I don't know, probably 43, 42 maybe, they have a distinct advantage over, because of their organizational structure of their units and everything, and the tactics they use, they have an advantage of being able to get behind enemy lines and cutting supply off. And that's how they can take on larger forces in some cases and still win the particular battles or conflicts. So that's what this is supposed to represent, this game. It also has aircraft involved. Aircraft have a lot of different little numbers associated with them, and I'll just zone in, or if I can get in here, to like some of these aircraft. So that is an ME-110 BC, and it shows the top, it says F, that's the type of plane it is, so it's a fighter. There's different symbols. A B would be bomber, and A would be attack plane, and T would be transport. And then there's the first number, which is the attack. The second number is defense. The bottom, that's on the top, the bottom right number is the attack value on enemy ground units, and then the last number is the movement. So the top two numbers are used for air combat, essentially, and then the bottom right number is used for either strategic bombing or bombing a target of some kind, and then the other number is the movement value of that unit. And there's all kinds of rules for when fighters fly with their bombers and then they encounter the enemy who scrambles to try to stop them, and you have a little bit of a battle beforehand in the air, and then any aircraft can shoot at the fight or at the bombers, and then whatever happens after that. Like the bombers either assist in the ground combat, or they can strategic bomb or tactically bomb rail lines or airfields or whatever. So that's just basically, I'm just giving you a basic overview of the game for those that are not familiar with these kinds of games. So now let's talk about this particular scenario and this game called First to Fight, Poland, First to Fight. Germany has not set up yet. I'm being the Polish, and there are victory points associated in this game that have to do with eliminating like the enemy units. You get a certain amount of victory points, both sides do, for the size of the units. Also, if you can do things like capture their governments or evacuate at the end of the game or don't evacuate the government, or France intervenes and is not defeated by the end of the game, or things like that. There's all kinds of little different things that can affect the victory points. So even though the Germans are expected to wipe the Polish out in this game, there are victory points which could make it possible for the Polish player to actually win. Now, I did read in the rules, and it basically did say that they expect, most of the time, the Germans to get a major or decisive victory in this game. Most of the time. But we'll see what happens here. You can do little tricks like run over and try to occupy. Maybe the German player left some spaces open and you can get out and occupy them. I kind of doubt that'll happen with my opponent, but it's possible. Alright, now let's talk about the strategy I used in the setup here. As you can see, I've got a line of Polish troops against Slovakia, which is basically mountainous around here. I have a complete, almost entirely complete line of defensive, a little bit back from the border. I decided, and this may be a folly on my part, but I decided not to try to take Danzig back, because it starts the game basically controlled by the German player. He's got a police unit in here already, and I think this is like a paramilitary Nazi unit that rose up. And so they've taken Danzig at the very beginning. And then I've got a fortress here, and it's already on the map. Try to zoom in, you can see it. It's called Hell. The Fortress of Hell. I think it's called Hell. Yeah, H-E-L. But, so, those guys have to start there. They tell you where all the units start. They give you areas that you can begin them in. And I decided that I didn't want to try to hold up here or threaten this. I was just going to pull back and create a continuous line of strength against the German onslaught that I figure is coming my way. Also in this game, let's see, before I describe that, I'll keep going. And then this is Prussia, or East Prussia. It was actually, after World War I, it was broken. Germany had this land, and then they also had this portion of land. And then Poland had the free city of Danzig, and then basically this corridor. And that basically allowed them to have a port. That was the whole idea behind it. But of course, that upset, Hitler and Germany, and so they wanted to, they demanded Danzig back, and basically Prussia, and Poland refused, which kicked off the war. And then I also there's also a river back here, so I'm trying to use all the terrain I can, I guess. There's a river back here, and I have troops basically back there that start the game. Now, at some point in the game, if my capital evacuates, and my capital, of course, starts in Warsaw, but if my capital evacuates, then bad things are going to happen to my forces. And not only that, but the Russian player, the German player is going to be able to bring in the Russian units, because they came in after a couple of weeks or something when the Germans invaded, because of their plan or their agreement. And if I can get those units off into Luxembourg or fly them out to a neutral country, then I actually will get victory points. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if if I'll just start moving guys off because I can't move them off until I actually leave. So it's going to be kind of a mix of trying to hold ground for as long as I can and leave. So I don't know. But my goal is to kind of condense into here and to defend Warsaw for as long as I can. It lasts for 10 turns. I'm not sure I'm going to last that long, but we're going to give it every shot possible to do so. I don't have much of an air force. My air force is, I put them in Warsaw only. And I figure I can support the front lines around here with my planes, the limited planes I have. My fighters can intercept if they try to bomb, because one thing is that the Germans will get victory points for strategically bombing Warsaw. They can get up to 10 victory points that way. So I'm not really concerned about Russia. I'm just going to try to keep my capital there as long as possible, and if it looks like it's going to die, I'm going to evacuate it, and then I'm going to try to move as many guys into Luxembourg as I can. Maybe Hungary. I don't know if Hungary gets, if I have that option or not. I'll have to look. But I can't move them into Slovakia or Germany or Russia. I'm not allowed to move them in any of those places. So Luxembourg and maybe Hungary are going to be my two locations to get my units, as many units off the board as I possibly can, to get me as many victory points as possible. In the meantime, the Germans are going to just destroy me, because the units the Germans have, they literally have a tank units like strength 12. I think it's like a 12-6, which means the defense is low, but it's 12-6 something, 10 movement. That's like twice the power of my infantry. On top of that, if you have tanks in this game, they get additional pluses in like open terrain or wooded terrain or whatever. It's only when you're in cities and forts and mountainous terrain that you get these defenses, that those defenses don't matter anymore. So I'm trying to use the forts as much as I can and the terrain as much as I can to survive as long as I can. So we'll see how this turns out. But again, I know we've got about almost 20 minutes just discussing the beginning of this game, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to do this kind of the same way I've done my past games. So I'm just going to go and show what it looks like after the Germans deploy, then what it looks like after the Germans attack, then it looks like after the Polish counterattack if I can. And then each turn I'm just going to go for each side so you can see how the game develops. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. If not, I do other videos, Axis and Allies videos and things like that, which I'll get back into. But right now we're gonna try this one out and kind of go back to 1980, 1990. I can't remember when this game came out, but it's in the 80s or the 90s. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Alright folks, this is kind of how everything was set up. Now there are restrictions, so the German player was kind of forced to put a significant amount of his forces here. Now just because you see all that blue, it's gonna look a lot different when everything starts rolling out, because we're using some corps markers, like there's the 56th Armored Corps, to give up some space. I'll probably put more of those when he moves them up. But that's essentially how the Germans are set up to attack the Poles. So that's like their northern attack units. Right there. There's a bunch of tanks and such over on this side. The aircraft are all lined out. This is his first game doing this, so he's kind of learning and playing at the same time, but this is a great one to cut your teeth on if you're going to learn how to play these kinds of games with the little cubes and the military symbols from the old days, or from, I guess, NATO military symbols. So we'll be back and I'll show you what it looked like after the Germans' first turn. Okay, here we are after the Germans' first turn and after their exploitation phase. They sent almost all their aircraft on ground support missions, and they were successful basically in every hex. As the Polish, he did get one unlucky roll, and he ended up losing a few like 4 points of German infantry, which amounts to 2 REs, which for me grants me 4 victory points. So I'm already ahead as the Poles, but I don't think that'll last long. So let's just kind of look at this. You can see there's armored divisions moving around Krakow. He advanced. He pushed me off of a fort. He took it and he advanced around the side. So there's armored divisions south of just south of Krakow, or right next to it. He's also pushing on the northern portion with a big corps. And by the way, these corps are all like represented on these sheets. So there's all huge armies. So just when you see a corps, just imagine that that's going to be a big force. He's got the 1st and the 2nd Infantry Corps moving up. Then if you look over here, he is pushing. He completely surrounded one of our infantry divisions. I basically don't have any way of getting out of that because he completely surrounded it with armor. Punched through my line just like you would think the German armor would do. And there's Warsaw. And there's his force. Now I haven't moved yet, so I haven't tried to close this line up yet for the Poles, but not looking very good. He did push a little bit further. He's really pushed in the south. That's where the majority of his army was to begin with. He didn't really advance too much to Posen, but he has, he's got troops out there posing a risk to that city, and chances are, I don't know, can I keep the line connected? I kind of doubt it with that force there, but we'll do whatever I can to muster the force up, or the line up. He did push me out of the woods, and he did wipe out another unit. The 39th Armored Corps wiped out another unit, and he kind of moved a couple infantry divisions up to, I guess, keep me locked in. It's going to be more difficult for me to move around. I still can do it, but I'm not sure I want to get my my divisions into that corridor up there. He did push a couple locations. The corps are where he pushed. So the 10th and the 11th both moved forward. And he went up to build up the defenses on East Prussia, just in case he thought maybe I would get a little ballsy and try to get across there. So that's where we end up at the end of the Germans' first turn. This is essentially 1st through the 3rd of September 1939. We'll be back and show you what the Poles done. Alright, so with the Poles, this is about as best I could do. I moved my mountain guys back to Krakow for defense. That city right there is Krakow. Got some mechanized. I haven't done my exploitation phase yet, so I'll still have to do that. I don't think there's going to be much that's going to happen. I kind of move back to this river line. I guess I'm going to try to defend. I don't know. Those guys are just going to punch right through. All that's clear terrain. It's all clear. That's my trapped division. What is that, the 29th? The 28th Division, Polish infantry division's trapped behind German lines. The tanks are all around it. He didn't move up, so I've still got that city, and I've rearranged some things. The 39th Armored Corps is right on the north end of it, so we'll see how that goes. And I moved this line back, trying to defend against the 10th moving too much forward too fast. I've got some guys around Warsaw, kind of a second line being built. And then over here, next to Luxembourg and East Prussia, I've got a little bit of a line here, so he's not going to be able to move through there very easily. The 2 cavalry that you see there, those guys are actually in wooded swamp territory, so they've got some good defense. So yeah, I've got my exploitation phase real quick, and then we'll be off to the second German turn of September 4th through the 6th. So I've still got a little bit of a line that I can kind of try to hold on to, but I don't know. I think the Germans are destined, obviously, to win this, but how long can I hold him back? That's my little Fortress of Hell, H-E-L, that he's going after. So again, this is the second turn. End of the second turn. We're moving on to, or pardon me, the first turn. Moving on to the second turn. Are we okay? Here we are at the end of turn, or the middle of turn 2. The Germans have just gone, so you can see all of the mechanized units down there trying to take Kharkov. There is a city that's still owned. You can see the little red counter underneath that one. They're out of supply now, but it's still owned by the Poles. They're trying to push the center really hard, and they pushed back a couple Polish divisions and basically destroyed them. The 12th, the 13th are two of the divisions, and then there's two stacks that are gone now, red stacks, and now we've got Posen is completely out of supply currently. Not too many pushes on the front. They did push, or the Germans did push a little bit on the northern flank, took a fort and got rid of a couple guys. But the line is still holding the north, and there's been no activity over here. This turn, there was a significant bombing raid on Warsaw, terror bombing raid, and the Poles were able to kill 5 of the German aircraft, which is pretty significant because that's like a lot of victory points. But the Poles also lost 2 of their fighters in the process, so they're down, I think, only 2 fighter aircraft now. The Russians are ready to go. They're on the border, and they're just waiting for the intervention when they can actually come across the border. Of course, that means that the Germans have to get the Poles to move their government or take the government, one of the two. But that's where we are at the end of the second, or the middle of the second turn. Now the Poles are going to go to try to reestablish the line. So this is about the 6th of September, or whatever, the 5th of September. And we're going to now move the Poles and see if we can't stem the tide of the German onslaught. Alright, we are at the end of the Polish turn, so September 6th is over. We're moving on to September 7th. The Germans are going to go. The Polish pulled back from the north because you can see that that whole line that's trying to keep Posen still in supply is just kind of trailing back. And that's about as good as they're going to be able to do. They strengthened the line a little bit around Lodz, but it's wide open country, so it's not the best to defend, or the best to try to protect against tanks, that's for sure. And then they've kind of pulled back some troops that they're trying to bring around Warsaw. I think the Poles are going to try to create another line of defense around the Vistula River. So they're just trying to slow the Germans right at the moment. They could not relieve the big city in the middle there, but Kharkov, I guess it's Kharkov, or Krakow, I guess it's Krakow, isn't it? Anyway, let me just look because I'm curious. Krakow, yeah. So the city of Krakow is probably going to get surrounded next, and the Poles are just trying to, I guess, beef the defenses up as much as they can, slow the Germans down. It'll be turn 4 soon. Nothing much going on there. They are building new divisions to try to rush to the front, and the Russians are ready to go. So the Germans are going to start moving now, and we'll move on to the next turn, which is turn number 3. Alright, we've returned. We are basically midway through turn 3. The Germans have just completed their turn. All the ones that you see are either Polish units that are isolated, or they just can't trace their supply lines too long to the nearest railway hex. So there's quite a bit, and you can see the German armored corps pushing right up. Basically, they're going to squeeze a whole bunch of Polish units and probably have an entire army captured there, I'm guessing. Lodz right now is still in supply, barely. There's some troops out of supply down here. That city fell. Krakow is basically surrounded. They're out of supply currently, but it's potentially they can get back in. So the Poles, heading in turn 3, I guess their frontage is going to be reduced to just Warsaw pretty soon. Nothing's really happened over on that front. The Soviets, they're still waiting with bated breath to invade when they are allowed to intervene. So that's where we are, folks. The red is starting to get surrounded and cut off. And we are moving on to the Polish turn 3, September 7th through the 9th. We'll be right back and I'll let you know how the Poles did. Alright, we are at the end of the Polish turn. September 9th, turn 3 is at an end now. We're entering turn 4. The Polish have managed to get quite a few of their units back into supply. They beefed up some of the locations that are near Warsaw, and they're just trying to hold the Germans back for as long as they can. They got also Krakow back into supply for now. And Poznań is completely out, and it's completely isolated way back there. I don't know if the Germans have enough to take that. Of course, I don't know if I talked about the Fortress of Hell falling to the Germans. And yeah, there's not much going on in that location. Neither side's pushing anything. The Russians are just waiting for the time to intervene. In the meantime, in just a matter of 10 days, or 9 days, this is how far the Germans have pushed in. And I just highlight the 47th and 48th Corps. They're only a few hexes away from Warsaw. So, alright, we're moving on to turn 4, September 10th. There's supposedly 10 turns in this game, but we're not even 40% of the way through, and Germany is already at the gates of Warsaw. So see how this turns out. So here we are at the end of the German turn 4. So this is the 9th, or no, the 12th of September. And they've isolated a number of Polish units behind the lines. Got them out of supply. Those ones just represent an entire unit. The city of Lodz is surrounded now. They did take Poznań, I think it's called. And then they have Krakow isolated and out of supply again. But they haven't, and they made one hex. Right there they moved up one hex to push closer to Warsaw. They're just really being very aggressive right now. So this is end of turn 4. It's now time for the Poles to see if the French will intervene. I think it's this time they roll for it, and it's not very likely, but I guess it's possible. We'll be right back. Alright, we are just ending turn 4. The French did not come. It was just too difficult. It was like a -2 and they needed a 5. So that's just not possible. So you have to wait till the turns progress for the French to intervene, unless the Polish are really good in the game and get German cities, then they get some advantages. So what happened? Well, the Poles did try to attack. You can kind of see if I can get this to focus. Okay, from the A mod anti-aircraft, that stack did attack the 511th artillery. It was a 1-to-1. If I rolled a 6, I could have got an exchange and got some points that way. That didn't work. However, I did come in with all my out-of-supply Polish infantry, which is now the Prue, as you can see. And they did force a infantry division to retreat from the Germans. And it retreated to where the 612th is, and they did reduce its size, so they're going to get some victory points for that. But that was probably the last hurrah, I'm guessing. There's 3 infantry, which is like the first time ever for them right now. There's 3 Polish infantry stacked where the 50th is, so they can make sure that they keep that fortification line strong for the moment. There's 2, I think, where the 44th is, and then everything else has 1. They did get loads back into supply, but just like probably for 1 turn, I'm guessing. And they're trying to keep this 1 division's job is to keep the Germans from doing too much exploitation, but it looks like their time is ticking for them. And Krakow got back into supply by just moving that artillery down from the woods that had to retreat. So they're barely in supply right now. So the Polish are doing, I guess, okay for this game maybe, but we are not even halfway done yet. The Germans are going to start their 5th turn, and the Polish force is pretty much reduced in power. Probably going to have to end up holding off into Warsaw. I'm not sure, but maybe a better strategy would be to blitz through this army on this side in the future, but I don't know. There's not a whole lot out here that you can't get later, I guess. Maybe it's better just to destroy the main Polish army before you take over the rest of the country. We'll see. So far the Poles are ahead in victory points, but the Germans usually get them when they force the Polish capital to evacuate. So we'll be back after the Germans complete their turn 5. So we're now moving into the 13th of September, 1939. And we are now, the Germans have just finished their turn, 13th through the 15th, so this is the 3 days, or 2 days I guess, halfway through the month of September of 1939. And yeah, the 48th is right at the gates of Warsaw. It's right next to the main city. So they finally made it. There's more armored divisions with support to the south. So it looks to me, and Lodz, sorry, is in Kharkov are now, or Krakow, can't keep saying that. Krakow are now out of supply and isolated. So, and that force right there has been beaten. You know, they've been surrounded, and their time is almost up. So now I guess the Poles are going to probably try to hunker down around Warsaw, hold on as long as they possibly can. They've already they're reducing the amount of victory points the Germans can get. The Poles have been pretty lucky with their air force. They only have 1 fighter plane left, but they have destroyed quite a few German aircraft that have come in for the terror bombing. The Germans can get 6 more victory points for terror bombing, but they have to deal with the anti-aircraft and that 1 lone fighter. But I think as soon as they capture these cities, it's going to probably be the end of that little lone fighter putting up some resistance. So we'll be back after the Polish finish the last, or turn 5, and then the game will be theoretically halfway over, but it's probably much closer to the end than that. The turns will go much quicker, at least for the Poles, I'm guessing. So I'll be back after the Poles finish their turn. Well, that was fast. Turn 5 for the Poles was very fast. So the number 1s you see are units out of supply. So Lodz is surrounded. There's a cavalry unit with an artillery basically in the woods that really couldn't go anywhere. And they've just flown out their aircraft for defensive support, basically along this river line here, and a couple planes up to the north too. I just consolidated, essentially, is all I did. So Krakow, it's in surrounded, is also consolidated, just to see if they can hold on a little longer. This force, there's been no fights whatsoever the whole game over here. The Germans didn't really want to launch any attacks, and the Poles just kind of like holding them back, I guess, for as long as they can. But turn 6 we're moving on to, and there are major German armored divisions down here, and I foresee a major push, potentially maybe even in the backfield. But the thing that the Germans have to still worry about is the supply, and they can only go with basically 7 spaces from cleared railroad hexes, and that's supposed to be a railroad hex. It just shows how far they've cleared to. So that rail line will probably be cleared up, and then there'll be 7 hexes away from that to stay in supply. Or maybe they'll run out of supply, I don't know. But anyway, it is now the Germans' turn. 6 out of 10. It is September 16th. This is virtually what is remaining of the Poles. Every other city, Lodz, Krakow, it's all fallen. So the Poles just have Warsaw, this line, some units in eastern Poland that they have to maintain. One division in Lwów, German division with some support heading that direction. So turn 6, Polish turn. The Germans will have 4 more turns to basically make the Poles evacuate or capture their government. We'll see how it turns out, folks. This is getting really quick towards the end. Right now the Poles have 37 victory points and the Germans have 13, but I think the Germans get quite a few victory points at the very end if they can keep France out of the war and make the Polish government leave and things like that. So, and if they can get all the cities and forts occupied. So we'll be back. And here we are, folks, the end of the Polish turn. They have retreated to the 2 cities of Warsaw and 1 territory just to the north of it. The Germans, of course, the 5th Infantry Corps broke through the defenses, and so they pulled back. And now they're just going to try to hold out in Warsaw for as long as possible. We're moving on to turn 7. So there is their air force has flown off, and much of their infantry divisions are infantry and construction, and there's a little armored division underneath there. They're all moving basically towards Luxembourg, because the way the rules read, they get victory points for getting stuff off the map. I pretty much think they've given up. They might hold on to Warsaw for maybe a round. I don't know if the 5th and the 44th and the 2nd are strong enough with all the German Air Force. The Poles have left 1 fighter there to defend against any German aircraft that would come in, and they just looked the writing on the wall because of all these German armored corps and divisions and such in the south are just coming around to surround it, so they know they had to get everybody out now. They have not evacuated their government yet. They are waiting for 1 more turn. If they can get 1 more turn without evacuating their government, then they'll reduce the Germans' victory points a little bit, and they'll hold on to maybe a victory in this game themselves, even though they're going to lose. That's what we're trying to do. So we'll be back after the German 7th turn, and we'll see what happens. Alright, I actually haven't finished the German turn yet. So this is September 17th, or no, September 19th. And Warsaw has beefed up their main city territory right there. And the Germans surrounded it with 3 corps at full strength, plus some motorized to help out. And the Poles did not evacuate their government. They're going to try to hold on for 1 turn. They're taking a big risk by doing this. And they're throwing all of their air power in. every bomber, every dive bomber that could reach, and the Poles have one fighter. It's going to go up and try to harass them a little bit. So we'll see how this turns out. Now, there's 2 city hexes. They could supply each other, but if the Poles lose one, the last of their major army will be out of supply because you have to have 2 cities connected. The Germans are already in the central portion of Poland, and the Poles are trying to pull out, but now you got a 48th Corps, which is comprised of, 2 full armored divisions and a light armored division and 3 support, basically coming right into the northern portion of Poland. So yeah, I think the time is up for the Poles. So I'll be back. I'm going to roll all this with my we'll roll it out, see how this turns out, but it's not looking good. Hopefully they can survive one turn, and then they can evacuate their government, and they'll lose less victory points, or give the Germans the fewest amount of victory points, but we'll see how it turns out. Okay, folks, bad news for the Poles. They tried to chance it. They wanted to hold out for one more turn. The Germans rolled on a 4-1 and a -1, and they forced the Poles out of that hex where the 44th is, which essentially they captured the government, and the government got to roll to try to escape, and it failed. So the Germans captured the Polish government, and then the 2 armies that are right behind it, which was next to the 56th Corps and I guess next to the 8th and the 44th, kind of north of it, they both surrendered right off the bat after the Poles turned. So the Poles moved back with the remaining forces to try to defend a fort. The rest of the units have run off into Lithuania to try to get as many victory points off the table as possible. The division that was in Lwów is running towards Hungary. There's an aircraft trying to get out, so the Germans are going to try to stop them from getting out as much as they can, and now the Russians are going to be able to activate. So this is pretty much, we're moving into turn 8. So the 22nd to the 24th is pretty much mop-up time for the Germans. So we will be back and let you know. I'm just going to kind of run through the whole thing, and I'll just let you know what happens. So we'll see you in a bit. So the Germans chased down the Poles with a mountain division and a couple other units, and they attacked them, and they destroyed the little unit that was trying to protect the air unit that was trying to escape to Hungary. So Poland lost the air unit and the little fortress guy, or National Guard unit, I guess it is. Everyone else is evacuated into Luxembourg, so those little units have evacuated. And there's one unit left, and it just moved into the wooded swamp. Last stand. Didn't actually fight at all in the whole war, as of yet. The Russians, they only get to move half on their first turn, so they moved up and basically have taken as many of the forts as they can, and they're trying to get over to capture Lwów. There's no defenders there anymore. Everybody's running off. So this is the beginning of turn 9, and it should probably end this turn, I'm guessing, because they just need to cover all of the forts, and I'm going to cover all of the cities too, just to make sure, and wipe out the last remaining unit. And then the game should end. Or wait, actually, there's one unit that's trying to get off, and I think that the German mountain division will go and take it out before it actually gets off into Hungary. Hungary is actually neutral in this particular game, so that's why these Polish units are actually able to get off the board in Hungary. So, okay, we'll be back and we'll talk about the last turn, I'm guessing, and then I'll calculate the victory points and let you know. Alright, so the Germans and the Russians have occupied every city and every fort and every fortress on the map. And the Polish are basically whatever is left of them. This is what got off the board. So, let's see here. The 35th Infantry Division, the 38th Infantry Division, a little bit of armor, machine gun battalion, a couple border guards, two construction engineers, a cavalry unit, and a light anti-aircraft. Also, the French airplane got off, and 3 attack aircraft for the Polish got off the board. So they got some pilots off too. So overall, it was 129 victory points for the Germans, 64.5 for the, which is really odd, 64.5 for the Poles, which is 2-1, which is a major victory for the German side. Which is what the rules said when I read them, that the German player will typically get a major or decisive victory in this game. It's really hard for the Polish player to win or to get something less, but it's still a fun game. And so you have been watching First to Fight, which is a game put out by GDW, which is Games Design Workshop, and they have a whole series of these games that were put out in the late 80s, early 90s. And it basically brings it to divisional level of combat and operations, and it's actually a really good game. This one is just, basically it's by every 3 days, but most of the other games that I've seen, that I have, are every 2 weeks. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any comments to make, maybe I've done something wrong, and I don't have the rules down exactly, because I haven't played this game or these kinds of games in a very long time, but I thought I'd film it. First to Fight, Poland, the invasion of Poland, 1939 by the Germans. And if you like it, maybe we'll put some other games out there, because I've got Narvik and some other ones that I can also film as well. So I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.